Reflections on teaching a class about board games and religion. On this episode of Board Game Faith, the bi-weekly podcast exploring the intersection of religion, spirituality, and board games. All right. Welcome, everybody. We're so glad to have you on episode 25 of Board Game Faith, teaching board games and religion, or reflections on teaching board games and religion. My name is Daniel Hilty.
And my name is Kevin Taylor. Special guest today. So excited. Thanks for having me on, Daniel.
You know what, Kevin? It is an honor. This I got to say, recording with you is always a privilege and an honor and a joy. But it's like this is a double gift, a double blessing, because not only are you the co-host, you're also the special guest.
Oh my gosh.
It's awesome.
And it was easy to set up a time to record.
Yeah, and
we didn't have to figure something out.
No, we were just able to go with the regular time. And we didn't have to go through the introductory emails about, hey, we're a podcast about religion and board games, and you just kind of do it. Listen to us. Here's yeah. So thanks for agreeing to be on the show, Kevin.
Oh, you're welcome. It's glad to take some time out of my day for this.
Well, you're
I think
awesome.
what you guys are doing are great. I just want to support you.
Thank you. It all goes to my co-host. He's fantastic.
Where is he?
I don't know where he is. I think he's probably on a guest on a podcast. Because he's in high demand. He's in high demand.
It's like Inception. He's a guest on a podcast that is this podcast. That's in a podcast. It's in a guest. That's in a podcast. That's terrible.
I wish he could be here because he really asks the great questions.
Oh yeah.
So you're going to be stuck with the B level questions. So we're gonna, for example, do you use metric or Fahrenheit or Celsius?
I personally have created my own system of measurements and weights.
Oh, the Kevin system. Is this
here's
the
how it
Kelvin
goes.
scale?
Is this the Kelvin scale? When you drive, whatever speed I'm driving is the correct speed. And whatever distance I think it is, it's just fine. And whatever temperature I want the food to be at is the correct. So it's basically binary. It's 1 or 0. One is correct and 0 is everyone else. So they're going too slow or too fast.
I like it.
And I like it. I feel good about it.
I don't see any problems with that.
Yeah.
1 is, this reflects the heart of Kevin. 0 is, this is contrary to the heart of Kevin.
It's like pass-fail. I'm pass-failing my entire life. And everything I'm doing. Like Homer Simpson said, Marge, nothing. I don't think it. Hang on. Marge, I don't think I've ever done anything wrong. So Homer just, everything is, whatever I'm doing is J-OK.
There are
poor Marge.
Well, it is a Kevin universe, and I am honored to be traipsing through it for a little while this hour. And speaking of pass-fail, we are talking this week about not that it's a pass-fail class, but a class that you taught, that you are currently teaching about board games and religion. So let me introduce our guest today, if I may, Kevin, if you don't mind me taking. Well, I can introduce him, and then you could introduce him too. But our guest today is Reverend Dr. Kevin Taylor. In the beginning, there was a dream. There was a dream, and that dream was Kevin Taylor, and now it's come to pass.
Now he just needs a backup band.
That's right. So if you've listened to the podcast before, you know already that Kevin is a great guy, and that he is an ordained United Methodist pastor, ordained Christian pastor. Happens to be United Methodist, as do I. We're both pastors. But
we're doing our best. We're trying.
Please. But in addition to that, Kevin is also a professor, holds a PhD, and teaches at Pfeiffer University in North Carolina. And so this past semester, Kevin, you had this really delightful idea, wonderful idea of teaching a new kind of class, a brand new class. And why don't we start off with, if you don't mind, please just tell us a little bit about, describe this class for us. Where did the idea come from? What were your hopes for it? What did you want to try to accomplish with this class?
Yeah, well, what I wanted to do was to explore some of the things this podcast has done and get myself thinking, because teaching gets you thinking and learning. And we have these classes called special topics, which are kind of wild card classes. And I've used that before and others have done that as a way to explore a particular topic and things. So it made sense to slot it in there and to do, I think I called it I just called it game theory and religion.
Okay.
To try to make it sound a little more, or a little less like we would just play board games the whole time.
Right.
Although actually, in truth, we do play a fair amount of board games.
Right, because you got Game Lab, which I want to hear about. I think this is so
Well,
exciting.
I mean, it's one of those things like you've got to try them out. You can't just talk about it. So if you're going to take a class on lifeguarding, you're going to have to get in the pool, right? And if you're going to take a class on biology, you're going to have to cut open a pig or a frog or something at some point. So I wanted them to experience some things which they really hadn't. Interestingly, they all like games, but except for maybe Secret Hitler or Happy Salmon and Uno, Monopoly, they really hadn't played anything else. So this was a new territory for them.
Well,
because they're kind of, they're the college kids. They'll spend $5 on a Frappuccino, but they don't really buy board games.
Yeah,
so they're strange creatures, really.
Well, that brings up something I wanted to ask about. Yeah, so what sort of students signed up for this class? Was it primarily more out of interest in the religion side, or primarily more interested in the game side? And it sounds like
it's more of the religion, and it's a small class. There's only 5 students, so that actually worked really well because there's a lot of games that are 5 persons, so I could not play and let them play, or maybe they team up to play.
Right. Good,
so
good.
if I'd had more than that, I would have had to have 2 sets or them doing different things at the same time. So in some ways, that was a serendipitous arrangement.
Okay.
But of the 5, 4 are either religion majors or going to do the minor. But we also there's so many tricks in education world. We cross-listed it so it could count either as the religion or as a junior seminar that they're required to take. So that kind of encourages more people to take it. So I think the one student is taking it maybe as a junior seminar.
Okay.
So the third year of college, they're supposed to take something.
Right.
It's kind of
So sounds like you didn't have students coming in with a lot of prior knowledge about hobby board games. This kind of
I didn't.
Yeah,
I did, and they're all really great. I mean,
Yeah,
I wondered because it wouldn't take 1 or 2 to really disrupt the class, but they're all very interested and they're good. It's a great experience. Yeah,
That's so cool.
It's really nice.
So
nice.
did you have did you have to make a pretty strong pitch, if I may ask? I don't know how this works in colleges and universities. When you have an idea for a new class, do you kind of have to like sell it to the department or to the dean or somebody to say, hey?
So that's the trick with special. Again, it's sort of the magic of a special topic class that we don't.
Okay,
it's really up to us.
okay.
I mean, I think if your chair or dean really didn't like it, they could stop it. But it's not a formal class you're recommending for the curriculum. It's sort of this wild card class, and you can do what you want pretty much.
Okay.
So I did. So the other concern is that there's enough students in it. They don't want you just teaching a class with 1 or 2 students if they can help it, because it's kind of a waste of resources.
Right. Sure.
Right? So they, and even 5's arguably a little small, but in general, COVID caused so many weird things for higher ed that a lot of the classes are leaning smaller this year, probably smaller than administration wants them. In general,
still recovering from the
yeah.
COVID
There's a
hit.
group that really has disappeared, and of course, higher ed. These are ripples. COVID was, what was it, 2.5, 3 years ago, and this is the group that was coming to college at that very time.
Yeah.
So.
So you come with a name for the class, Game Theory and Religion.
Mm-hmm.
You got 5 students signed up. So then you shared with me the syllabus for this class, which looks amazing. But if you mind just talking a little bit about what went into your thinking about how to design the class? What were your thoughts on structuring the class? Thinking about what were you trying to to balance, to expose them to. Yeah, how did you structure the class?
Well, the first thing I thought is, what have I learned from Daniel? And I mean, that's a
No,
joke, but actually
no,
it's true
you
because I
keep
didn't know
going.
about these books till we started doing the book club with podcasts. So
Oh,
I started
you're
looking back at
very
the
kind.
podcast episodes and things we've used. So I know I wanted to use Bernard Suits, The Grasshopper
He's
book,
so good. Yeah, yeah.
which the more I revisit it, the more I really love it. It's a hard book. So anyone out there, just know it's kind of a book you have to dip into, step away from it. The more you come back to it, the more rewarding it is. So some excerpt you can use a certain percentage of things in an educational classroom and not break copyright law in the U.S. So I used just the beginning and end chapter of that within the class, and then I had them get the McGonagall book, Reality is Broken, a user friendly book, and you introduced me to that one as well. So that gave us some materials to work with in terms of a discussion.
Great,
Because
great.
McGonagall, so I guess the larger themes are what are board games and why does it matter,
Right.
as well as history and defining. So, well, I guess defining is what. So, what are board games? How did we get there? Why do they matter? And so that would be history, definition. But McGonagall, it seems to me, is really working with the why does it matter? And the whole bit of it is how can we use what works in games in real life?
Yeah, yeah. Is that an emphasis that you tried to explore in the class too? Like, how can we apply gaming principles to life?
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's kind of the phase we're in now. So I thought I thought of defining some history, different types of games, game mechanics, so they would see the variety of games out there in terms of what you're actually doing in the game. And then I wanted to think about how they impact our lives, which is kind of a real theme of this podcast.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, how do we gamify life, or what do we learn from games? What happens if we think of game as or life as a game? How have games tried to teach?
Mm, mm.
And as Monopoly has, as various other games, as Snakes and Ladders came out of elements of Hinduism and teaching about the difficulty of living out Dharma, right?
Oh,
So
I didn't
Shoots and
realize that.
Ladders.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Huh. I could see
Yeah,
that. I could see
it's
that.
very easy to slide back down. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's a
Right.
history
Right.
there.
So are so you introduce them to these books, Grasshopper by Bernard Suits, Life is Broken by Jane McGonigal. You get them thinking
Hmm.
about, how can we bring gaming principles to life, how to apply them to life, why do they matter? Um, I I noticed, and you may not be at this point, but I noticed in your syllabus also you brought in a book that we've not discussed and was new to me. Um, uh, Nietzsche's Zarathustra.
Uh-huh.
And so, would you mind just take? I mean, really intrigued by that. What
Well,
are you to that point yet in the class? And
we
what
are
role?
not.
Okay,
And this is, of course, uh, me. This was what I thought of 3 months ago. So it's a very
okay, okay,
strange thing
right.
and it may not work. And I'm no expert with Nietzsche, but this is the 1800s. They are interested in art and aesthetics and exploration and play and games are kind of defining some of these things. What is art? What is, what's going on with this? And Nietzsche tries to write an alternate gospel from Christianity and religion. And Zarathustra there is kind of this childlike figure that approaches everything as play. So that's what I wanted to get at, is pick
Interesting.
up some excerpts from that and how, but I'm not sure there's anything in there where he actually plays a game.
Okay,
But his whole approach to things is very childlike and playful and joyous.
okay, okay.
So that was my hope, is what kind of things did, if we gamify life, is Nietzsche suggesting some ways that might look,
Okay. Okay.
where maybe we're less anxious or more open to failure or more open to be ourselves and less afraid of what other people think. Right? Like if you play a game, you have to be willing to lose or look like an idiot, walk away, and you're okay.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And that's a pretty great lesson, versus internalizing the failure or feeling like it makes you a bad person.
Yeah. So the games. So I mean, so it sounds like on the one hand you have very specific texts about games and the role they can play in life, and then yeah, maybe it's Zarathustra, but in other areas as well, talking about just kind of more general theme of playfulness and play, and that kind of maybe gets into the question about the, as you were saying earlier, the why.
Mm-hmm.
When you design the class and approach the class, do you have a why in mind already, or are you waiting to see how the why develops as you move on through the class, like the why
I don't
games,
think
why
I have
play?
a why.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's the bit that I'm still formulating,
Mm.
which is a little secret again of higher ed, that people that write books and things, it's because they taught the class a bunch and they came up with something, and they wrote lectures or outlines or ideas down. They tested them in class or gave papers on it. So it's been kind of tested out, and it helps them figure out sort of an argument or an idea and develop it.
Right, right.
So that's what I'm doing. No, I've got some ideas, and back with Adrian Adamescu, he was really hinting at kind of ways that we might think of God as someone who has designed the world as a game.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So he hinted at some of that ideas of playfulness in that episode. So check that one out.
Yeah.
So yeah, but no, I've not formulated it. So this is very much a work in progress.
It reminds me your reflections on, I guess a couple things. There's that old saying, if you really want to learn something, teach it.
Absolutely.
Which I hear you saying, and then also, I forget whether I mentioned Thomas Merton on this podcast before or not, but Thomas Merton is a one of my most beloved authors, a Trappist monk who passed away in 1968, I believe. But just, he just wrote abundantly, copiously, and wrote formal books of theology and reflection, but also just kept these journals upon journals upon journals. And I find I enjoy those journals more than his formal writings.
I didn't know about the journals.
Yeah. He wrote down everything, and I think, I don't know if he's the one that originated the quote, but at least he is known for saying, that he writes to find out what he believes, and that's stuck with me, and I think I found that in my own life, like when one of the gifts of this job is I get to write a sermon every week, and yeah, it can be burdensome, and I complain about it more than I should probably too, but one of the gifts of that is that it kind of forces me to figure out what I believe every week, and I hear you saying that as well, that so writing, teaching, it's a way not only for the students to learn, but for you as well to kind of maybe crystallize your own thoughts and reflection on.
You don't come to it as no one's an expert on anything, to be honest. Like everything is up for revision or examination, or it just takes a couple of good questions to realize something is boneheaded or inappropriate or whatever, and you don't know that without a conversation.
Right.
And so this is I've tried to stake out an area that you and I both find interesting, but I'm not sure what's going to grow. If it's like a garden that we've staked out, we're not quite sure how it's going to grow or what's going to interact or intersect. And with classes, it's even harder. It's really till the third time that you teach something that you really start to master it.
Interesting.
Then it gets weirder, I've found, having taught for so many years now, I guess 12 years or so. After a while, it so well, you end up kind of treating it cavalierly, like you don't.
Mm-hmm.
You end up making weird jokes or interrogating it in a way that's not useful because you're almost tired of it. So
Ah,
there's almost a
yeah.
life cycle to it. You struggle through the book at first or the material. You don't know what's going on. You make a lot of mistakes. By the third time you get it, by the sixth time, you probably need to pick something new
Wow.
because you're kind of burned out on it and just having weird tangents.
Right,
I
right.
think that's why the old professors get into tangents because they're a little bored. But it's just easy to go back to what you know. I mean, there's bits in books I can visualize the page because I've had to look at it so much.
Right.
Like I
Interesting.
can see what's on that page already.
How frequently does it happen when you're teaching a class? I guess especially a class you're familiar with, but I guess it could be a new class too. And I know this gets beyond just the specific class, but how frequently does it happen where a student will say something that it just feels like it opens up the window on a completely new area for you, or it's almost like a revelation for you, or like a new insight for you, or a new learning for you. Does that happen
Oh yeah,
very
probably at
frequently?
least every 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Depends on
yeah,
the student. Yeah.
cool.
Um, and not that they're just lasting things, but no, it's really impressive when a student says something and you're like, oh,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
never thought about that way. And it could be just putting two things together or seeing it a different way or bringing a different life experience. But yeah, no, that's the thrilling bit to see
nice.
them challenge you and knock you off your feet a little because you're teaching them. So it's kind of like being the boxing coach. You're like, oh, you've defeated me. Once I was the master, now I am the learner. So yeah, no, it's really fun to see that. And I mean, you've seen that in Bible studies, right? And
Oh yeah,
moments of
yeah,
teaching in the church. Yeah, it is quite
yeah,
exciting.
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. No, that one. I think that's a good testament to your what a good professor you must be.
Well, I don't
That I mean that
know.
you're
I
open to
try.
learning. Yeah, yeah. No, that's wonderful. So yeah, and I like the Padawan master learner
Yes.
teacher thing reference. Good,
Defeat me, come
good,
at
good Star
me.
Wars Star Wars
Yeah,
reference there. Um,
that's right.
I, by the way, I want to be like a Kevin Taylor Padawan. I want to be like I'm 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 learning to inhabit this
Well,
Kevin Taylor
first stage is
universe.
to become very lazy. Next week we'll work on grumpiness. You think it's
I,
easy, but it's not. You really have to cultivate a entire life set of grumpiness.
I think I'm well down
Uh,
those roads too already.
yeah. Uh, so one
Well,
of the challenges. Sorry, go ahead.
well, no, I was gonna ask about the game lab, but keep going. Where
Yeah,
you're going to
no,
say?
that's where I was going to go as well. Let's go
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
I wanted to teach them games, and I realized it's going to be tricky with it meets Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 50 minutes. So how do you teach and do a game in that time period?
yeah,
And
yeah,
which games do you pick to sort of show them? Like I want to have a little fun, but I'm also it's a class. So I want them to see different design and mechanism choices.
yeah. So you came with the idea of game lab. So walk us through, please. What does game lab
Well,
game lab look like?
at some point I realized we should play games on Fridays. That would be kind of fun.
Yeah,
So that's how it started.
good way to end the
And
week.
like a science class in the U.S., we often would have or even say a foreign language class, you might have instruction for 2/3 of it, and then on your own you had to go to do a lab where you actually did things. Or when we had foreign language back at Wake Forest in the early 90s, remember the language lab in the bottom of Tribble Hall, and it had little headphones and you'd listen,
Oh yeah,
so that kind of experience.
yeah, yeah,
So that's why I called it Game Lab, but it really was tricky to pick games. And there's a
yeah.
few that I wanted to play. Well, just because I needed something that we could teach and try to grasp without it running out of time.
And in
So
50
time was
minutes,
the major
that's
issue.
a
Yeah,
major
it's
time
tricky.
constraint for teaching and playing. Yeah,
So Pandemic, we had to do Pandemic. It's
yeah,
just
yeah.
such an important game in the history of Western board gaming,
Yep, yep.
or I guess international board gaming, let's be honest. So yeah, we had to play Pandemic, but we didn't get very far, and we just had to pack it up.
Yeah.
So Pandemic is one. Dune Imperium
Mm-hmm.
was one, which is a great game, and they could see all the different mechanisms. So you've got a race in terms of getting to the points first. You've got hand management, you got worker placement. So there's three different, more than that going on in there. But it's also, I could see they were very confused.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was one of those tell me what to do
Ah,
so I can take a turn and try to learn what's going on here.
yeah.
The ones they really gravitated to were things like Secret Hitler
Mm-hmm.
and Coup, just because
So a simpler rule set.
simpler rule set, but it's fun. Like I think teenagers like that kind of thing where it's kind of like Among Us, where there's a traitor, hidden
Ah,
traitor.
of
I
course,
think
Among
that
Us.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, that kind of suspense and getting to play different roles, it makes them very socially comfortable.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
Secret Hitler and Coup were good, great for that. So those are some I tried. Bonanza was a big hit. That's a fun one.
That's a great game.
Oh, it's good. It's
Well,
hard. It's good.
I didn't until I saw this. I didn't realize what a fan of Bonanza you are. I'm a big fan of Bonanza too. That's
Mhm.
we need to play that sometime. So yeah, so they like Bonanza, but it was hard to teach in the
A
time
little
constraints?
bit, and
Yeah,
even the rules, it is kind of feels counterintuitive that
yeah,
you you can give them cards at one point, but you can't any other time.
right, right, right.
Like you can't mess the order of your hand except for when you're. So yeah, that was good. And King Domino trying to do the Euro type game
Okay, good, good, good.
where you're having to build a little kingdom and you're looking for certain things and kind of drafting and placing them for thinking about points and yeah.
So you're thinking your parameters and trying to decide what games to play to introduce to the students in the game lab were, is this something that we can at least get some experience of in 50 minutes with teaching? And then maybe were you trying to do, I hear you saying maybe, but correct me if I'm wrong, maybe exposing them both to games that are influential, that have been especially influential and important, but also games that are representative of different mechanisms. Is that
I,
kind
to
of
be
the
honest, was really going for the mechanisms.
Okay, okay.
So I would say Pandemic and Bonanza. I don't even, was Bonanza hugely influential? I'm not sure.
I have heard. This was years ago, but I remember watching a Dice Tower episode. Which Dice Tower, for our listeners who don't know, is a channel on YouTube which does board game reviews. And I remember one of their early episodes. They were just talking about how blown away they all were when they first played Bonanza. Like they were saying, "What? I can't change the order in my hand," and just how revolutionary that was. So it seems like that had some maybe impact when it came out originally.
Probably so.
I don't know.
Yeah. Um,
So,
yeah, so I was really
so
going
just
for game mechanisms. Look
Yeah,
at all the different ways games have flourished and different ways you play, and whether it is Euro style where you're going for points and can't directly harm the other player, or whether you're going more we actually haven't done a lot of Ameritrash type things where you really are battling and rolling dice, but probably everyone knows that because everyone's played Monopoly.
right. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Were there any games you played that it just? So you said that they really seem to resonate with the social deduction games.
Yes.
Were there any games that just did that seemed like a miss, like they just like, this just isn't working? And do you have any reflections on that, like maybe why some worked and why some didn't?
I think they've all worked.
Okay.
Of course, it'd be interesting to ask them, but I think they've all worked except for the time limit. And we've tried a bit of scheduling maybe something out of class, but it's not worked out. And but that probably would have been the better answer. Would be to set up 2 or 3 periods in a night or a weekend where we've got a dedicated where we can really play a game.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
But so we did do Freedom, which is about the Underground Railroad,
Right.
and that was kind of neat. But it's neat to see what it's doing. I did not do a good job of process. Like we kind of played it and then we ran out of time and stopped. So I've not processed what they got from it. But it's a quirky game, and I'm not sure it's that. I mean, no offense, but I don't know if it's a great game mechanically. But it's a great game in terms of. I appreciate what it's trying to do.
It's a good game for teaching something. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. which is a theme we have visited here in the past. Actually, we're going to discuss more on our next episode as well, but stay tuned for that.
But
So-
Freedom, I should say too, I've only played like twice, so I can't.
Okay.
Actually, I've only played it through once,
Okay.
so I should qualify that and say that I've not given it a fair chance. But it's not really a game that you just really want to play
Right.
thematically.
Well, but it's hard. I mean, it's a hard theme, is what.
That's
we've
right,
talked
because
that,
it's
and
about slavery, and basically some of the slaves are going to die. There's no way to, which I think is part of the point of the game, that
yeah,
the path to freedom is there's a certain military aspect that you have to be willing to sacrifice some, but some of the slaves have to die so that you can abolish slavery.
yeah.
That's been my impression of it. And so it's a very unpleasant thing. So we play these war games, you don't think about soldiers and stuff, but this because of the theme
Right.
and the cruelty of it. So the you've got slave catchers, and they move when they see the slaves.
Reminds me of our conversation we had with Dan Thoreau a couple episodes back that we just started to touch on about game as art, and I may mention another book related to this, Rafe Koster's A Theory of Fun for Game Design. But just, the more we see games as art, as saying something, the more it brings up questions like that. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all for it to be, but it reminds me of, like, there's certain movies that your comment about your experience of playing Freedom reminded me of this. There's certain movies that I've watched and that I've heard similar experience in others, where they say, I'm glad I watched that. That's important to watch, but I don't want to watch it again because it was such a difficult emotional journey. I think about like Schindler's List or Dead Man Walking, or and I'm sure there are more contemporary examples, but movies that deal with important themes and say something important, and it's important to see them and watch them.
Absolutely.
But you're not going to watch them over and over again because it's such an emotional journey. And I wonder if I hear you saying that maybe as games become more and more like art, or seen as art, recognized as art, if maybe that same dynamic can be applied to certain games as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a niche of all art, is to challenge us and make us think, and and we're seeing that in board games. We're seeing people creatively explore themes that might play with preconceptions or get us to learn something. So Cole Worley is the guy that would come to mind as most exemplifying that I've seen.
Right.
So
right.
for my birthday, what I want is to get John Company second edition, because that just
I've heard that's really
so
good.
awesome.
Yeah.
And he's exploring East India Trade Company and colonialism. There's a real place for learning.
Yeah. So,
which is why I sympathize with the Victorians, because even though maybe they weren't always doing games that were teaching rich moral lessons, they did see that possibility, and they wanted to use games in that way. So that impetus is not wrong.
Right.
But,
and I think,
yeah.
Go ahead.
That's all. Yeah.
Yeah. To some extent, as I understand it, my limited understanding of modern board game history, at least some of the roots of board games as a commercial enterprise really do find their roots in Victorian era England, and you're right, and those were, as I think you probably know more about than I do, but those were games that were often envisioned as a way of teaching morals and ethics to the players. And
part of it is that was an excuse for adults to play games. Like you were, it's okay to play a game with your child that teaches them something.
Right. Which
otherwise you're not supposed to be doing that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of where games are still considered for children,
right,
and that happened in America as well.
Yeah, and attitude, perception, we're still kind of still around to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, board games in Target and places are with the kids' toys.
Yep.
And Walmart too.
Yep.
Which is fine, but it just we think of it as a kid's hobby, but then you get stunning 50-year-old men like you and I walking through examining the games.
And people are like, whoa, if cool people like them
Oh
are
my
interested in board
gosh.
games, I could play them too.
The autographs I've had to give out at the
Which
store. It's
is
just,
yeah, I've never heard anyone say, but that's what I would. That's in my head. That's what I imagine.
why do they want
them
me
saying.
to sign Pandemic? I didn't design it. I don't get it. But I'm like, sure, whatever, kid.
Hey, there's
And then
that
I get on a
guy.
little Barbie bicycle and I bike off down, through the store. Beep, beep.
There goes that guy who's the co-host and the guest on Board Game Faith. We
And
gotta
look,
get
he
his,
can ride a bicycle.
and he can
designed
ride a
for
bike. Yeah,
little
yeah.
child.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Kind of like the Shriners do with
it's
their
the
little
Kevin Taylor
cars.
universe. Yeah,
Yeah, right. The little hats. Yeah.
yeah.
Dude. I
I
really
love it. I love it.
I know. I want to do that actually. I should join the Shriners.
We should do. Let me know.
Fez hats and little cars, raising money
Yeah,
for
good
children's
things.
hospitals.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I have a Fez hat right here.
Do you?
Actually, our video viewers can.
Oh my
There you
gosh.
go.
How
There
did you
go.
get that?
I think we got this. I think our kids got this. I think it was back when we were when we're still into, to some extent as a family, into Doctor Who, but especially during the Matt Smith years when Matt Smith was Doctor Who, was playing Doctor Who. He would occasionally wear a fez, and he had a line that fezzes are cool or something like that,
Uh-huh.
or no, bow ties are cool. But he also wore fezzes. And I
ties
think he said
okay.
I think he said fezzes were cool as well. And so we invested in a fez because we get all of our definitive statements on coolness from TV shows about time travel.
Right. Because they know they're from the future.
They know
It's time tested.
if the trend is going to continue or not.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And although we don't see evidence yet, clearly it's going to happen.
It's coming.
Might as well get ahead of the curve.
It's coming. 2057, everyone's wearing a fez.
Don't get left out, folks.
You only have, 34 years to prepare.
BoardGameFest.com.
That's right. So you mentioned not having time to process the games. That was what I was wondering about. Is my next question. So you have these classes where you talk about game theory and books and why and where, and then you have the game lab where the students experience it. And then what? Do you invite them to process, reflect on their experiences of playing games, or is there not enough time for that in even outside of the class, or what is there a next step then to that?
Yeah, I think one thing I could do is have them rank the games, and we've done that a little unofficially, but it was interesting how some really liked the King Domino. One student liked the King Domino because it's just sort of very soothing.
Yeah.
And the others like the coup because they just sort of in your face and getting them to talk about which ones they really liked and why.
Yeah.
So I think that's an element. The Kate McGonigal, the Rowdy is Broken is really interesting so that because we're having a book discussion, that gets them engaged and talking.
Yeah. Yeah.
And hopefully this last phase of the class, which is, well, I guess it's the phase we're still in, which is how do we learn from games to be either more religious or more authentically human or both.
Yeah.
And we've done a little with magic circles, and I still feel like there's more to it. But so I have a lot of spidey sense things going off, but I'm not sure how to formulate it. But that's kind of the end goal of this.
Well, I really want to affirm you're doing this. I have some more questions, but just before I forget, I want to affirm
thanks.
the importance of what you're doing, because, I think we've talked about this before, both, I think, on the podcast, but also offline, you and I, Kevin, that, this conversation about games and play and religion and spirituality and what it means to be human, it's not something that a lot of people are talking about, or that a lot of books have been written about, or research has been done into, or reflection has been done. And so, in some ways you're kind of having to kind of invent the airplane as you're flying in some ways. And certainly there are resources like Grasshopper and McGonigal, but I think your teaching classes like this, and other people out there might be doing the same, teaching classes like this, you're really propelling this conversation forward, that hasn't really been propelled forward very much. And so I think you are really helping this whole larger conversation by doing classes like this.
Well, that's
So
kind of you. Thank you.
you. No,
I'm trying. I
you know,
don't know how much I'm helping, but I'm trying.
no. If I were in North Carolina, I'd take the class. It sounds great. Well, so thinking about trying to kind of where the students end up in this class and where the class ends up, I saw in the syllabus that near the end, you ask them to do final presentations. And may I ask a little bit about that? I mean, I assume maybe not a lot of work has been done on that yet, but
Yeah,
like,
it's the idea of doing some sort of a final project. I'm trying to remember how I phrased that in the syllabus, but that they would do some kind of um, wait. Do I have a final? I think I'm
well,
confusing my
maybe I
classes, to be
misphrased
honest.
that. I want to look it up too. Just a moment
No, I
here.
think you're right. I am asking them to do some research in something they're interested in. So, and part of it is the nature of this junior seminar that they'd go and do some research
Oh, they have
and
to.
present it. So I forget if it's that presentation or
I
that
see.
they've got a final project of some sort. I
Okay,
mean, this
yeah.
is,
This is on the last day of class. It just says final presentations.
well, I mean, I'm just going to be brutally honest. Sometimes you sketch these things out and then you,
Right.
it's kind of a work of fiction,
I
especially
understand.
in a class I've never done before.
Right.
So, and it might be I use that as a time to sort of reflect on what they've learned or favorite things or
Yeah.
favorite games, like I was saying. So I'll have to figure something out. So
Yeah.
it's very much uh, yeah,
I understand. I
it's
understand.
it's a rough outline, and then we'll see how it goes when we get there
Yeah, I
in terms
understand.
of the class.
I plan out my in theory. I plan out my sermons for the year, and I kind of put them on a spreadsheet, and then
Yeah,
and people will come out, and rightly so. They'll say, what were you thinking for this Sunday coming up next month? And the truth is, I really have no idea, except for just the little thing I jotted down on my planner. But
yeah.
it's just a placeholder in some ways.
Yeah, it is a
Yeah.
placeholder. And if this were a more traditional class with a textbook, we
Yeah.
would just go straight through the book. Like it's very clear. So part of this is I'm not used to designing a class that is somewhat an experiment or a collection of things. So in trying to find resources and how we do it, this is I'm a noob to it, which is
Yeah.
fine. I mean, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah. Well,
And figuring out, but no one has a textbook on this and type things. So.
exactly. This is you're a pioneer. This is new territory,
All right,
and we need to write that board game faith book. We've been
we're working
which
on it.
you're already working on it. You're already working on it. Yes.
Yes,
I just
board
need to
game
help
faith,
you.
the book.
The book. So kind
Board
of
game faith, the game.
oh
I'm gonna be Daniel,
no insta
little
lose.
meeple.
I'm gonna be Daniel.
Rule
You
number one.
lose.
Collector's edition includes Murphy, the dog.
That would be great. So
And halfway through the game, you have to run an errand. If
That's
you play as
right.
Kevin, you have to just do a random errand for your children or something. You have to, like, go pick a child up from swim team or something.
that'd be awesome. And
You have to leave the premises and come back in 20 minutes.
and then you have to like trek across the country in an electric vehicle to
Yes.
and then
Yes.
come back and yeah.
And then come back.
So maybe final set of questions for you. We talked about we talked about the class and game lab and kind of what kind of hope where the students may be going. So what about you? So like what are things that you have learned from this class? What are your reflections on it?
Um, one thing is that I enjoy being around teenagers, and it's really neat to be in a setting where, I don't know, there's a certain games bring out a sort of teasing and a camaraderie, even though there's a little bit of a power bit because there's a
Yeah.
grade and I have to issue it. And I don't, grades are kind of dumb and I hate to do it, but you do have to kind of do something because
Right.
that's just the way the system is.
Right.
But it is neat. It really breaks down that sage on the stage, as they joke, that we're engaged in a certain way and we're creating, and it feels yeah, it's really nice. It's really nice to connect with them. Like they're good people and good kids, and yeah,
It sounds like it kind of
it's
humanizes
nice.
each other in both directions, maybe.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's really cool.
absolutely. It is humanizing. That's a great way to put it. So that's one thing I can take away. Another bit is that it's really just nice to learn something and then actually do it. And you can't do that with other classes necessarily, like theology or philosophy or something.
Hmm.
I guess if you were learning Greek for the New Testament and you translate it, maybe that works. But so many things in teaching with religion, you don't, you know, some things lend themselves to actually doing, and that's
Right,
pretty neat.
right, right. Yeah, yeah. I could see that in a lot of religion classes you can't really have a lab or maybe the practice of missions or service or things like that. But in a lot of cases,
You know,
not necessarily so.
one guy I met, an older guy, retired pastor, he said in seminary they did a for one of their classes they had to spend 24 hours on the streets.
Mm, interesting.
Like they had to survive for 24 hours and $10, which
Wow.
wouldn't happen today with liability. I mean, it's kind of scary, but they
Wow.
had to sort of see what it's like to be homeless. Was And
Wow.
I don't remember the what the class was. It might have been social problems or something. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
That's
there's
powerful.
example of how to make that happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, if you're doing a class on different religions and you can visit them, that would be pretty neat.
Yeah. 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 That's true.
But not every topic lends itself to that. So it just depends on the material. But yeah, it's fun. It's also fun to explore things with students, and you do learn. So I guess that's the final takeaway: is it's just a great way to learn, is to teach and also to prepare and to be forced. And I mean, that's what we're doing here in this podcast, right? Like we prepare, but we learn from each other and learn from feedback from people. So
Right.
it's pretty great.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Well said. Yeah. That we the growth in learning and knowledge in the area and experience with the area is a collaborative effort between you and your
Hmm.
students. And you're right. Certainly, it's been the case with this podcast too.
Collaborative. Yeah, that's right.
We've heard so many good things from listeners and feedback that have I know
And our
have
guests.
taught us a lot, and guests who taught us a lot. And
I mean, it's how Socrates did stuff,
yeah,
right? He's like, well, what do you mean by that? And they would just have I mean, Socrates didn't really, he just, I mean, he had ideas, but he
yeah,
formulates it through a dialogue. So, yeah,
yeah.
that's a deep way of learning.
I think especially in your class, but I think what we're trying to do in this podcast too, but I think in your class too is there's this sense that there is something to there's something bigger and maybe even transcendent about the role of play in games in life and faith in the world of the spirit and the soul. And because that's not something that has been talked about a lot in the past, it's hard to know where to begin that conversation and what to say.
Hmm.
But what I see, especially in that class, and what we're trying to maybe do in our own small fumbling ways in the podcast, is we're just to try to have that conversation nonetheless, in the hopes that as the conversation progresses, there will develop a clearer picture of what that bigger, more transcending meaning is. Does that seem
Absolutely.
fair?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that seems
Yeah.
really fair. So, thanks for helping me out, bruh.
Well, thanks for sharing, Kevin. It was great to have you as our special guest today. Um, Kevin, any other final questions
No,
for
no,
for the guest? Okay, all
no.
right.
Besides, what's coming up, Daniel?
Oh, I'm so excited about what's coming up.
Do, do,
So,
do,
so dear listeners, dear listeners, and dear maybe viewers on who are watching this, if on some video component as well, we are having some amazing guests coming up, and it started with today, because today we welcome the amazing Reverend Dr. Kevin Taylor. to talk about reflections on teaching a class on board games, game theory, and religion. Next episode, we are welcoming another of my favorite podcast hosts. Next episode, we are welcoming Mandy Hutchinson from Salt and Sass podcast, a great podcast that she co-hosts with Suzanne Sheldon. And Mandy's going to be revisiting with us a subject from one of our more popular episodes, Board Games That Teach. This is Board Games That Teach 2, the sequel, the return. This episode was more about how do you teach about board games and religion. We touched a little bit on board games that teach around freedom. This is going to be the subject of the entire episode next episode. How can we use board games to teach? Because besides being a podcast host, Mandy is also a teacher. And so we really look forward to sharing that conversation with her. And then after that, the next episode, episode 27, we are going to be welcoming Takuya Ono. Takuya Ono is a Buddhist abbot who, at his temple in Japan, regularly hosts board game plays for pilgrims, other people who visit his temple. And so we're going to be talking with him about kind of where he sees both the intersection of board games and Buddhism, but also specifically the role of board games in his ministry there. And that's just going to be amazing as well. And I'm so thankful for all of these amazing people and conversations. And listeners, you are among those amazing people.
That's it.
You are part of this conversation, and we thank you so much for being a part of this community. You are making it better. You are propelling this conversation forward. And we just thank you. We thank you for devoting part of your time and energy to this community. We are so appreciative of you.
We got a newsletter coming out every other week. So subscribe to that through info@boardgamefaith.com. Just shoot us an email and tell us you want to subscribe. And we are on Instagram, Board Game Faith. Appreciate it, Daniel.
Thank you, Kevin. It's great to talk with you, and we'll see you all later on. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.